All right, so now we're going to take a look at properties of equality. So the first one is multiplication, and then the next one we're going to talk about is division. But it works in the exact same way as it did with addition and subtraction. So with multiplication, that means if I have some number x equal to a value of 3, and I multiply both sides by the same number, I still end up with an equivalent statement. Same thing applies with division. If I have some number x equal to a number like 4, and I divide both sides by the same number, I end up with an equivalent statement. We're going to apply this in example 4 and use our inverse of multiplication and division to solve the following problems. So taking a look at part A, we have negative 3/4 times n equals negative 2. So we want to keep in mind that the 3/4 and the n are technically being multiplied here. So what we need to do is we need to divide by the negative 3/4 because that is the inverse operation. And that is what's going to leave us with just an n on this side. Now, doing this math in your head might be a little bit difficult. If you would rather write the negative 3/4 as the decimal, negative 0.75, that would be appropriate here as well. If you wanted to solve this using some of our knowledge of division and fractions, I'm going to do this work off to the side. So we have negative 2 divided by negative 3/4. We're dividing by a fraction, so that really means we're taking negative 2 and we're going to multiply it by the reciprocal, so 4 over negative 3. So again, what I did here is I took the reciprocal of this fraction, and now I'm multiplying it over here by that reciprocal. So negative 2 times 4 is negative 8 divided by negative 3. Or that simplifies down to be 8 over 3. If you had this in decimal form, you would have ended up getting an answer such as n equals 2.67. And for right now, I would accept either of those answers. Taking a look at part B, 4x equals 24. What's happening between the 4 and the x is multiplication. Opposite or inverse of multiplication is division. So I get x is equal to 6. I want you to try problems C and D on your own. Pause the video, then press play to see the answer. All right, taking a look at problem C, 0.09 times w equals 1.8. Opposite of multiplication is division, so I'm going to divide both sides by 0.09. And I end up getting w is equal to 20. Looking at D, y divided by 4 equals negative 7. Inverse or opposite of division is multiplication. So I end up with y is equal to the product of negative 7 and 4, which is negative 28. All right, now moving on to identifying solutions. So we're faced with a problem that says, what value of k is going to make the equation k plus 4 divided by 0.2 equal 5 true? So what we're trying to figure out is which one of these options, A, B, C, or D, that when we plug them in, we get a true statement. So it doesn't matter how you go about this. You can plug any number in and it doesn't make a difference. I'm going to start with, let's start with something kind of in the middle. I'm going to start with C. So if I plug negative 3 in for k, I'm going to substitute it in, and then it would be plus 4 divided by 0.2 equals 5. If I begin simplifying this down, we need to remember our order of operations, and that I must divide the 4 and the 2.2 together first before I can do any addition. So 4 divided by 0.2 is going to give me 20. And then I'm going to take negative 3 plus 20, and that gives me 17. But this equation says it needs to equal 5, and it doesn't. That's not true, which means negative 3 is not the answer. I'm now going to try A. and plug a in. So I'm going to take negative 15 and plug it in. So negative 15 plus 4 divided by 0.2 equals 5. Again, dealing with order of operations first, I need to take 4 divided by 0.2, and that gives me 20. Carrying down the other numbers of negative 15 and then the equals in 5. Negative 15 plus 20 is 5, and that does equal 5. So I know that A is my solution, and it makes the equation true. Example 5. Using some of our skills from the last problem, we are going to solve the equation in example 5. Remember, when you're going through these, you should always be applying your order of operations first, then begin on your solving the equation skills. So we have a negative 8 divided by 1/2. Well, negative 8 divided by 1/2 together gives me negative 16. I'm going to carry my first variable down because I didn't do anything with it, carry down the equal signs, and carry down the minus 3, or negative 3. Now I have p minus 16 equals negative 3. Inverse of minus or subtraction is to add. So I'm going to add 16 to both sides, and that's going to give me p is equal to a positive 13. I'll zoom out here so you can see that. Now, this next part says to check your solution. We haven't necessarily seen that yet in our instructions, but it's always a good job to check your solution. It's a really powerful tool to be able to say, hey, I know that this is the right answer because when I check my work, everything makes a true statement. So checking your solution means we're going to take our answer of p is equal to 13, and we are going to plug that in to the original problem. So I'm going to end up with 13 minus 8 divided by 1/2 equals negative 3. Order of operations says I need to do negative 8, or even just the 8, okay, divided by the 1/2. And that's going to give me 13 minus 16. 13 minus 16 gives me negative 3. And on the right side of my equal sign, I'm saying negative 3 equals negative 3, and that's true, so I know that my answer is the correct one. All right, let's take a look at our last example of the day, which is modeling real life. So example 6. The temperature in a crater on Mars is 0 degrees Celsius at 1 p.m. The temperature decreases 8 degrees Celsius every hour. When will the temperature be negative 50 degrees Celsius? So we need to figure out how many hours does it take to get to negative 50 if every hour we go down 8 degrees Celsius. So you could do this by hand, and you could start and almost create a timeline and say, well, at 1 p.m. we are at 0 degrees Celsius. So that means at 2 p.m. we are at negative 8 degrees Celsius because we're decreasing, we're going down. And then you can say, well, then that means at 3 p.m., after another hour has passed, we're at negative 16 degrees Celsius. And you could continue this. It might take you a little bit of time, but this could work. Another way is to think about this and say, well, every hour we're going down 8 degrees. We have like this negative 8 degrees. And so we could think, well, if we're going negative 8 degrees every hour or per hour, that would be like multiplication. And we need to figure out, well, when I take negative 8 times by my hours, when is that going to equal negative 50, my negative 50 degrees Celsius? So now we've created an equation because it said every hour we are decreasing 8 degrees Celsius. Now the word decreasing can mean subtraction, but it can also mean a negative. Because we're starting with this 0 degrees is like our starting point. So if it's helpful to think of it as 0 degrees, so 0 minus 8 times h, could be helpful, but it's not necessary because our starting point is 0. So solving this, we're going to divide by negative 8. we're going to get h is equal to, well, negative 50 divided by negative 8 is 6.25. So that means it's taking 6 hours and then 0.25 of an hour, right? So the 6 is referred to 6 hours. And then this 0.25 of 1 hour. Well, we got to figure out how many minutes is that? Well, the number of minutes that are in 1 hour is 60. So if I take 0.25 and multiply that by 60, I get 15 minutes. So that means it's going to take 6 hours and 15 minutes to reach negative 50 degrees Celsius. If we're starting at 1 p.m. plus our 6 hours plus our 15 minutes, oops, and you can't see that because I have my thing in the way. Let me move this so you can see this a little bit better. There we go. Well, 1 p.m. plus 6 hours is going to take us to 7 p.m. plus the 15 minutes, we will be at a time of 7:15 p.m. That is when we will reach negative 50 degrees Celsius. So that wraps up our lesson. We've talked a lot about using those properties of equality to solve equations, one-step equations, adding and subtraction being inverses, multiplication and division being inverses, and then we started scratching the surface of how to actually write and apply these equations to some more real-life type situations. You are now good to work on the 3 skills in the IXL account. You can find those skills in our modules, and I have them all linked under the assignments there for Unit 1 or Chapter 1's module. You can also see them linked in our week in preview as well. All right, thank you so much, and let me know if you have questions.